Welcome to Normalizing Non-Monogamy, the podcast where we interview incredible people from across the entire spectrum of non-monogamy to hear their fascinating stories. We strive to bring guests on the show who have a healthy approach to non-monogamy. However, it's important to remember that everyone does it a little bit differently, and the views and opinions expressed by our guests do not necessarily reflect our own.
Additionally, we produce this show for entertainment purposes only. Please be aware that we aren't doctors or therapists. Consult a medical professional for anything regarding your health that you might learn about on the show. Enjoy!
Welcome to episode 4 of the Power of Witness series. Today we have David and Amanda on the hot seat. And if you have a chance before listening to today's episode, go back and listen to episode 53 of our show. They were on there and it was helpful background. And if this is happens to be the first Power of Witness episode that you're listening to, we highly recommend going back and listening to episodes 1, 2, and 3 that in your podcast player, because they'll have a lot of helpful information before diving into this episode.
Yeah. No, I think the framework that we lay out in the intro and then, like jumping in here, it will still be powerful, but it's going to be a lot better if you get a little bit of background. So
absolutely.
Yes.
And I wanted to say again, with their permission, that David and Amanda, with all of these couples, I did a 30-minute consult before we started the series. And this was just to get to know them and help them decide what they want to talk about. And we really hit it off and we really started to click on some issues that they wanted to dig in more. And so before we even did this Power of Witness that you're about to hear, they hired me to start working with them privately. So we had a 30-minute consult focused on Power of Witness, and then we had a 90-minute session leading up to this. And so you're going to hear where we pick up from that 90-minute session. So again, if you hear a little deeper rapport with them, that would explain why. I love the work that we did in this session, especially because it highlights the importance of creating appropriate frameworks for communication and how if we don't set up, I call it meta conversation or process conversations where we can talk about how we talk about things. If we always are diving into content, then it just feels like we're chasing our tails. And I see this with clients all the time. I often say that when clients can start to shift to a greater percentage of their communication being meta or process conversation instead of content focused, that's when they really start to feel the dynamics change in a positive way, in a healthier way. So you're going to hear, there'll be times where you'll hear both of them try to get down into the content, and I'm constantly kind of bringing them back to, let's come back to this framework we're trying to create. They've got these communication restraints, we call them, and we're trying to heal those restraints and bring more openness by fixing or creating a better scaffolding or framework for how they communicate. It's a fun one.
Yeah.
And we also, go ahead.
You go ahead.
I would say we also wanted to mention that if you want to find out more about this Power of Witness series, or if you want to join additional cohorts that Catherine is doing in February and March, as well as beyond, you can go to our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, click on the resources tab, and there'll be a Power of Witness option there that you can click and find out all the information, as well as show notes for these episodes that include so many helpful links.
Yeah, and you can also get to them in the show notes of your podcast player. We've got direct links that will take you to all of these resources as well. So a huge thank you to David and Amanda for showing up and for being a part of this.
Yeah, and let's jump in.
Great. All right. So Amanda and David, welcome to the hot seat. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So I'll just update everybody. What's that, David?
I said it's good to be here, we hope.
Definitely. So I'll update everybody. I got to have a private session with Amanda and David earlier in the week. They decided to start some coaching in addition to the group coaching. And I felt like we got to some interesting places that will lead us into tonight. So I thought I would give just a quick review, kind of where I remember us leaving. And then maybe we can start by you guys telling me what else you've thought about, what other conversation has come up around this idea since. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So we went through lots of things, and David coined this term that I just loved about that you two are struggling with communication restraints. And I loved that word, and the way that I reframed it was that there's this honesty that you both really want to have, that you had, especially at the beginning when the relationship energy was fueling it. And the communication restraints, the word that you used, David, the way that I saw it was like, there isn't a safe framework for the level of honesty right now that you guys are wanting. And as I do when it's one-on-one, by the end of the session, I get pretty blunt, and I pointed out that I feel like you both have poisoned the pot of wanting that safe framework, that you both have your own responsibility for why that framework doesn't feel safe right now. I was able to hear how much you both want that framework. You want it to feel safe. You want the honesty. When that happens, I think it can be really easy to look across at the other person, to look at the way they've poisoned the pot or why they're not making it safe. And so what I was asking you guys to do is to maybe get more reflective about how each of you have poisoned that pot. So I think I'll stop here and then let each of you kind of report in about the areas we were talking, that I had some ideas about how you all had each contributed to the framework not feeling safe. And then we'll just continue where we left off. Does that sound good?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think we thought we'd give like a super brief, our relationship is quite young relative to the relationships we've heard about in the previous sessions. Amanda and I have been together 6 years. Yeah, 6 years.
Not that we're young, but we are young together.
To Bill and Felice and Jill and Jack, we feel like we're in the first inning, and we know that we want a long-term, happy, healthy relationship. We met as I was coming out of a 25-year successful relationship, but wanting a very different life for myself. And Amanda was, in fact, in school working to build a different life for herself and for her daughter, who was, I guess, 6 at the time. Mm-hmm. Time flies. We pretty much immediately also went into business together. Mm-hmm. And so we entered our relationship as an open relationship, and that had so much communication in it, as you were sort of saying, Catherine. Like we bonded so much in our exploration of things, and there were things too that came on the table that we didn't really run to ground. So I think about it now as they kind of come back up, but we really bonded intensely, and some of that had to do with how we would play with other people, and some of it had to do with whatever. Long and short is, now you fast forward, and we spend, not just because of quarantine, but like all of our work time is together, and so that's a little background on us.
Okay. So, and again, I can review these if you guys want, the ones that I sort of guessed at, the ways that you all have contributed to the lack of safety. But do you all, well, I'll just do that. And then you guys can tell me how those landed as you've had a chance to sit and think about them a little bit. So, Amanda, the way that I felt like, just again, in the small amount of time that we've worked together so far, that your desire, your habit, raising, we've actually found out that we live very close, that I live very close to where Amanda was raised. So know this well, that's Southern people pleasing. This freeze for survival. So if you feel threatened, you're not likely to fight or flight. You're more likely to freeze, which can look very much to David like disengagement. And then he continues to try to get engagement when you're frozen, and that pressure of feeling like you need to say the right thing, please him, and act makes you kind of burst under pressure. And we even kind of had a joke together about a bit of a Tourette's, like you just would throw something out that maybe he wanted to hear, maybe sometime, I don't know, just to sort of have something on the table. And that often what would pop out of your mouth wasn't even the truest truth for you.
Yes.
Right. So it could look to David like you're just telling him what he wanted to hear. You pop out with a lot, so you tell him what he wants to hear, and you freeze or disengage when he's trying to reach for connection. And then when he really needs that connection, you pop out a lie. And lie is in air quotes, because it certainly doesn't. Maybe. Wait, and we'll maybe say lie wait, sorry, let me just say lie, meaning not necessarily with malintent, more of a kind of lie, if that makes sense. Something that just pops out that isn't necessarily your truth.
The diarrhea of the mouth. It just all comes out.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then for David, your side of the street that I was guessing about is when Amanda freezes in the absence of her giving information, you fill in the story. Now, all of us fill in the story. That's what our brains want to do. Our brains want conclusion and an end. They want to know what's going on. But I think you are an especially crafty storyteller. You're very cognitive and have a lot of skill in this area to fill in what you think it must be. And so you get pretty locked into this story and assumption and get pretty sure about them, maybe even before checking in with Amanda. So then when you do check in with Amanda, it almost sounds like an accusation instead of a curiosity. The other thing we talked about is filtering her actions through the golden rule filter instead of the platinum rule filter. So you're saying, okay, well, if Amanda if I did X, it would mean Y. Amanda is doing X, so therefore it must mean Y. And that is definitely not the case. Amanda doing X could actually mean A, B, and C. But in the moment of story and assumption, the filter you rely on most heavily is that golden rule. So it's been a couple of days since I landed those hypotheses in your lap. So let me know, talk to me about how that's landing. How you all have discussed this. Let's just go from there.
Well, I mean, I think it landed very well because, I think, as I've said, and I think I mentioned it when I first talked to Finn and Emma, that, communication is hard for me. It's probably hard for everybody in some form. But as you just pointed out, I have all of these kind of go-tos that kind of happen, and trying to sit and figure out maybe why I do those things has been insightful, I guess, over the last 48 hours. But it was, David and I think we want to give you sort of the world, but we don't always necessarily know how to ask for that. So it's very frustrating to show up and want to give everything, but not be able to get there. But with the golden rule, that one is has been, I guess it was harder to really sit through that one. And just again, finding the words, especially when it's hard for them to come to you anyways.
Take your time.
Can just put you into a spin that you have to pull yourself out of.
Well, you shut down, which is, can be, challenging, whether, in a lot of ways. And as you said, sort of, Catherine, it's just, then it becomes hard to know what is, like a little bit, I think, Jack and Jill sort of referenced, kind of understanding whether a yes is a yes because that's what you want, or, look, I've definitely in my 52 years experienced some benefit from the patriarchy, and I'm, somewhat insecure. So I don't always know if what, you are agreeing with, whether that's, business or home or even, in our non-monogamous journey, I don't know if that is in difference to cultural, it's hard to know when you're being true to yourself.
Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And so hard to know if she's being true to herself, and the extra layer of then also being truthful to you, with you.
Yeah, because I end up seeing a lot of conflicts. right?
Conflicts
Also.
or contradictions? What do you mean?
Yeah, contradictions, probably. Yeah. And that manifest themselves in a lot of different ways, but they end up using me, and I'm definitely insecure, and I think one of the things we have in common, is we both have very young mothers who raised us really on their own, but because my parents were so young, I think they made some mistakes early on that definitely give me my own script that probably comes into play when Amanda sort of clams up and doesn't want to share. And that could be as innocuous as like, what do you want to do this weekend? Or do you like this sex toy?
Sure.
When that range comes into play, and that just didn't seem to be there when we met in our first year or two. And
well, I would extend that spectrum even more from what do you want to do this weekend to what sex toy you like, but even something that would maybe ping harder and closer to your heart is, do you still like me best? Am I still the one? Do you like this person? Is this sexual position with this other person better than mine? Like some of the things that we get into with non-monogamy that, at the end of the day, I think that all of the different questions we ask could pretty much, the parenthetical phrase under each one, the meaning, the real question is, do you still like me best?
Well, they all put Amanda into freeze mode. Any of the questions.
Yeah.
Which may be a good example of the golden rule. I think through a lot of therapy with David and I, we do know that open-ended questions never land with me. They will immediately make me go completely blank, and sometimes that him knowing that and then asking me a open-ended question becomes, well, why is he trying to piss me off?
Well, no, I forget.
Or why is he trying to confuse? I don't know. I know. I mean, I hear you.
Somebody mentioned. I have my own sort of mental health challenges, and I'm bipolar, and just I don't always phrase the question right.
Sure.
and I have my own intensity, but also obviously, I'm sure has its own set of triggers, but it also probably references sort of history or, we have both
Dave, I'm going to ask you to speak up a little bit. I think you're sitting a little bit further back, so it's a little harder to hear you when you speak. So, and I think that is, I love both. I want to go back and slow down a little bit. I love what both of you just said. So, Amanda, you owning the golden rule piece for you of thinking, if I knew that open-ended questions made him freeze, then I certainly wouldn't ask them unless I was trying to piss him off. He's asking me open-ended questions, so he therefore must be trying to piss me off. Like, that's a beautiful example of golden rule. And I'm sure as we say it that way, it's easy to see how that's the thing about that golden rule idea that I shared with you guys from the relationship boot camp class it's when we say it out loud, it sounds so ridiculous. But then I think it's kind of painful because when we're thinking about it, we realize how we use it all the time, right? So I really loved your kind of allowance and sharing why that can be difficult. And then David, I also want to say that I really appreciate your acknowledgement and admission that, sometimes you forget and you don't phrase the questions right. And maybe the part of that's your bipolar, some of it, I even wonder about if you're asking an open-ended question when you're already feeling a bit threatened. So if you're asking an open-ended question, trying to get some connection or some reassurance or some soothing, if you're feeling a little threatened, well, first of all, if you're feeling threatened, the front of your brain isn't quite as online, the part that would remember. that Amanda doesn't like open-ended questions or that they might make her freeze. Mm-hmm. My other thought is that when you feel threatened, again, this story, this create the story or fill in the blanks, the needing to know, I always have this sense that maybe it puts you into the kind of this hyper vigilant, like hound dog, like I got to figure this out. And so being very cognitive and verbal as a skill set of yours to be able to, and a very quick thinker, that you go into like, okay, I'm going to ask these open-ended questions to try to get some information, to try to gather data to see if I need to be as scared as I feel right now. And then Amanda can't give them to you. And it's like, oh no, this is bad. My worst fears are confirmed.
A little confirmation bias?
Maybe. Well, let me ask you, David, how did that land? Did that feel, as I've said, sometimes I throw needles against the wall and they stick and sometimes they don't. So if it resonated, tell me. If it didn't, tell me too. But just tell me if any of that landed, and if so, kind of how, and put it back in your own words, or if it didn't, correct me and clarify.
Well, you're right. I think out loud, and as it's kind of like you said. I mean, the golden rule doesn't quite work, right? Just because I think out loud or because I want to get to an answer quickly, Amanda processes things very differently, and like learning to deal with that is something that I've definitely been working on, and I think need to keep working on. And my sense is you feel like you're working on being able to communicate sort of your. You had a good term for it earlier, Catherine, like your truth.
Mm-hmm. I mean, as I threw that out and hear David's confirmation of it, what insight does that give you, or are there ways that you see that from being in partnership with him?
Hyper vigilant, asking the questions to get to an answer definitely sounds familiar. And as I just said, right, like he may not necessarily understand or realize what's happening, but when I get that first open-ended question and then I kind of freeze, and then, I may be able to get to the next one, but then, if another one comes in, like it just becomes this cycle. And I guess I need to learn better ways to say that I'm past the point of being able to.
Well, by the way we've dealt with this is I don't ask questions anymore. I mean, that's
not good.
Well, but that's, I mean, I think we talked about this the other day, Catherine, is that, basically, eventually, either I don't ask questions anymore because I've filled in the blanks, or you don't ask questions because if there aren't answers, or that the answers are placating, potentially accurate, but also potentially a defense mechanism. So I don't ask much, which just sets up a whole other.
Which is why we need a better framework.
Yes. Well, and David, I think that it does make sense why you would stop asking the questions for both of those reasons, and then it would make you feel. It takes away intimacy into me see. If you stop asking questions to see and to understand, or for you to be seen and understood, you are lowering your chances of and your connection points for intimacy. And most of us start to distance. It isn't even like I am going to now distance myself. We just, without intimacy, it's a floating away almost. The intimacy brings us back together. And then when we are, whether it's because we're busy raising kids or starting a business or we can just have this kind of natural float away, nothing intentional or malicious. And the intimacy brings us back. If we don't make time or effort for that intimacy, and I'm talking about sex, I'm talking about deep conversations, I'm talking about questions, any of the ways that we can see into each other and be seen. That's the that's the lube. That's the eros energy, right? Like we need that eros energy, that intimacy to be able to continue to come back together. And how lonely that must feel.
Well, I'm challenged because after the birth of my now 19-year-old son, intimacy left my marriage, and I share some of like Bill's feelings of grief about about a wonderfully successful relationship, but 25 years of monogamy, and I'm a very erotic thinker.
Mm-hmm.
And
mm-hmm. Yeah. So those open-ended questions, it almost sounds like I'm gonna give them sort of two different flavors. Sometimes they might just be they could even be a front of the brain, adult-driven desire for intimacy. Into me see. I want to ask you these questions because I want to see into you. And by the way, I'd love it if you'd spin it back on me and want to know these things about me. And then the other time I would imagine you using these open-ended questions is when there's a threat to your attachment. And it's like, I need to see if you want to see into me. I need to see if you'll let me see into you. I need to see if this is going to be okay.
Right? That's very aftercare related, by the way.
Sorry, what's that?
That's very aftercare related.
Say more.
When I mean, not obviously with COVID and such, but not the case now. But in the times where we've explored, that time for Amanda to process is it sometimes in conflict with my need to like reconnect and So.
And your need to reconnect verbally through deep conversation.
Mm-hmm. Verbally and physically and just emotionally, yeah.
So all the different ways of intimacy.
Stage 5 clearance ways.
Yeah. Okay, and Amanda, I'm gonna come back over to you here in just a second because there's a couple of framework things that I'm thinking of. But I also wanted to ask you when we talked about the time when David does these questions, and it's more about like soothing, like where he's gotten hypervigilant and he's needing to try to gather facts or see if these contradictions can line up, where there's something that it's like a fear, is this hypervigilant fear.
Trying to shut down the BS sometimes.
Where there's a assumption that there's BS. Okay, so we go back to story assumption.
I mean BS in the sense of the homework that you gave us with
the belief system. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's say that for the listeners because they may not know. So I had a client a long time ago that talked to me about his BS file, and I just loved this. So BS standing for belief system, also for bullshit, right? And so we have these old belief systems that inform so much of our behavior and our motivation and our needs, the ways that we try to get soothed. And these BS files could be things like, I'm not good enough. People can't be trusted. I'm not lovable. I have to hustle for love. I have to please people to be accepted. Amanda, I can imagine you having a BS file about that one, or I better say something to get them off my back, or I better say something or they won't stop. Like kind of this pressure type of thing. So these BS files that we have. So if David, which BS file were you thinking of for yourself when I was saying that you reaching out for soothing in that hypervigilant way?
It probably, it's reconnecting after another person's been in our life, and there's been forms of intimacy. Mm-hmm. I have a need to really to just really reconnect, and we over the time have learned that
But what I'm asking is which BS file tab? What is the name of that file that you think really drives that? Like if you don't get that reconnection.
I imagine it's a fear of I imagine it's related to a fear of being abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
My mom took, she was 17 when I was conceived, and, she ended up taking, I think, 6 months off or so after I was born, and apparently that left some impression on me.
Yeah, that's quite a generous way to say it, that she took 6 months off like you were a job that she could furlough for a little while.
I was with my father. He was a loving parent, but, she was very young. And so... But
then she also came back and you were ripped from your father. So you got
a double.
Massively screwed twice.
I don't remember.
Well, yeah, but your brain does.
Your body does, for sure. Okay, so that BS file of I'll be abandoned. So the aftercare of wanting to reconnect, to make sure, all right, we've introduced someone else into our life. And again, I know, as we talked about, this is not your logical, rational adult brain saying, are you going to leave me for him? But this BS file going, are you going to leave me for him? Am I going to be abandoned? So that need. So when I was getting there, I was wanting to ask you, Amanda, hearing it, the way you presented it, like he knows I don't like open-ended questions. So when he's asking me an open-ended question, it's easy to think, why is he trying to piss me off? When we flip this and help to understand the open-ended questions more as a coping skill to try to close that BS file of his, instead of it being about trying to piss you off, that this is more of a maladaptive skill in the moment, potentially, because if it doesn't work in your relationship, it's adaptive at some point, maladaptive now, to soothe himself. Does that shift anything for you about how you imagine sitting in those moments in the open-ended questions?
Yeah, yes. And I would say that I am a natural giver of the benefit of doubt. So I will always come back to, this is probably not about me. This is something with, him. But then there kind of becomes a point at which I feel like I'm always I'm always giving the benefit of the doubt, always.
Well, but when I...
And wait, hold on, David, hold on one second. When you say I'm always giving the benefit of the doubt, I don't think that that's ever a problem, to always give the benefit of the doubt. I think I'm hearing a part of the sentence of that maybe there's frustration that you don't feel like you get the benefit of the doubt back.
That could be true. Very true.
Okay.
Well, I was going to say, maybe it's not always about somebody else, or always about, both can be true, right? So, it, as Amanda said, it's challenging. Words, can be challenging, and like I said, I don't ask because they don't come.
I got a little lost there, David. Can you help me understand what you meant there?
Well, Amanda will freeze up but not answer, and that can be, like I was saying, that could be.
Well, I guess I'm trying to understand help me loop that back into Amanda's answer about giving the benefit of the doubt and maybe feeling frustrated that she doesn't get it back.
Do you have any positions you're interested in exploring? And then having no answer.
So a question you have asked is...
So not every open-ended question is about my past. Mm-hmm. And the challenge of input and always driving the bus, then you end up okay, is this just, is this just so that's when you start to question the yeses. Mm-hmm. Because then, was that really a yes, or is it, is the question just, you just don't want to? Does that make sense at all? I guess I thought we were talking about this a little bit the other day.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm following you. I think I'm wondering, when you say if I'm the one kind of always driving the bus, it makes me question. What specifically does it make you question?
Well, with the right now with our communication, sort of loop of Amanda either wanting to be a pleaser or not giving much feedback because she's processing, and then my not really asking much in the way of questions. Like it just, like you said, it ultimately what it ends up, you end up being in roommate mode, right? And if you're actively exploring, ethical non-monogamy in some way, and the communication is sort of more forced. But even then, that's a little challenging because of the communication challenge. So, as Amanda said, we need to work through a better communication framework.
I'm also I just now thought, oh my God, how many open-ended questions have I asked Amanda just tonight? This is news to me, by the way. So I'm gonna try to be better about giving you some true, false, multiple choice answers. If that helps.
She still loves me immensely, even with the open-ended questions. So
okay, I won't be voted off the island yet, huh?
No.
Okay, so let's get. I think this helps to this is of course the struggle with a 50-minute time frame, but I think we've set the stage to understand some of the back and forth of how these adaptive skills that you both have. We used to be adaptive in some way. We are getting clear that they have become maladaptive as far as looking in service to your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You are two very different people that get your needs met in very different ways. And so we need to we could maybe start to work on this framework, start to maybe build the first level of the scaffolding to just let's start to come up with what are we going to do about this? That doesn't mean that the depth of what we could talk about is over. I'm sure we'll dive again, and then that'll help us create the next level. So one of the things that came to me as I was listening to you all go back and forth a little bit earlier is, for me, oftentimes there's this cluster of this, and again, I shared this with you, David, that there's a lot that I resonate with your struggle in one of my relationships. I feel like I struggle to get some of that intimacy and get as much information. I want to process everything verbally, and that's not his style, and some of that. And the three things that come to me when he does a kind of a contraction or a recoil is my immediate is that I personalize it, catastrophize it, and make it an abandonment story. That's just where I go every time. And so the work being not flipping it on its head a little bit. And instead of trying to figure out ways for him to not retract or have the expectation that he won't retract, that when he retracts, for me to stop and be like, oh, look, AFOL. You know what that means? Another fucking opportunity to learn.
Yeah,
Thanks, life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. And you got to stick your tongue way in your cheek when you say it, like AFOL, give me some chemistry, please. I would rather have one of that at lesson right now. So I sit with the awful raw feeling of personalization, catastrophizing, and abandonment immediately. Like that just happens every time he recoils. And then I have to say, what work can I do to depersonalize, not make it decatastrophize, not catastrophize, and shift the narrative that this is not about abandoning me. So that's one of the things I wanted to offer to you. And I'm going to stop talking for a second and see how that lands. Now, keep in mind, I just started with you because I resonate with you, not because you need to be the one that does the lion's share. I've got plenty of stuff I'm going to burn toast Amanda's buns on here in a second. But how does that feel as a challenge to you? Does that feel resonant, and does it feel like a challenge that you could do? And maybe we can talk about steps.
It's not something I've done. So
it's what?
I think maybe I think I mentioned to you and yeah, I did mention to you that like when I have had feelings and I've verbalized them, that has helped. Mm-hmm. And when Amanda's been able to hear them, they resolve. Mm-hmm. When I, or at least when I feel that she's been able to genuinely hear them, and I don't know how to explain that, but I feel like I kind of know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And your suggestion, which is a really good one, is for me to do that in my head, my own head. Mm-hmm. And that, I need to do some experimentation with. But yeah, that makes sense.
And to specify by doing it in your own head, in counselors, we call that interpsychic work, where you are talking, like saying that to yourself, like, okay, I'm having this feeling that I'm being abandoned because she's enjoying another lover in this moment. But actually, and you talk to different parts or characters, some of the things we've talked about in sessions past with some of our other hot seat participants. So we're learning to do that within. But another thing I want to ask, that's interesting how you said that when you have feelings and you notice them, that's first. So you have feelings, you notice them, that's first. Then you are brave enough to share them. That's big. And then when Amanda can hear them in a genuine way, and you said, I just know. And I agree. We know when we are seen, really seen, heard, really heard, understood, really understood. Even if it isn't their experience, can understand and give us that leap of faith that they can understand that it would be that way. And then loved anyway. We know what that feels like because we all want it so badly. What are some ways that you've been genuinely heard? Are there things you can point to that Amanda has done, a way she looks at you, a way she has responded to you? Is there anything that you can point to give her some help? And because my guess is the way she's looking at you, she wants you to feel that all the damn time. Is there a way we can help her know how to do that better?
I definitely feel very heard about a lot of things, about how I identify sexually, about the importance to me of a healthy and vibrant sex life, to a relationship, about the importance of counseling, and the importance of adult time for the adults to maintain the relationship, in addition to the relationship with their kids.
Okay, so those are all wonderful things, ideas or things that matter to you that you feel heard on. But what is she doing that helps you feel heard?
Seeing you.
Okay, so showing up for counseling. Okay. Mm-hmm. What else? Is there a way she looks? Is there a way she values her time? Is there a way she organizes things?
Yes. I mean, Amanda's always investing time and energy in helping in helping facilitate my clear thinking. Whether that's dealing with my OCD or what have you. I mean, Amanda's always investing in our relationship.
How about in the moment when you share? So it's wonderful that you feel heard by her in your sexuality. When you have shared a part maybe that you were nervous about or vulnerable, in the moment, what did she do that made you feel heard?
Podcast, I heard you have to use your words.
I mean,
that's funny coming from me.
I was about to say there's some irony here with Amanda saying you need to use your words, David. I love it.
Thank you. All day.
It's okay. Take your time to process.
Can you restate the question? Like, help me understand.
So you've given examples of what she has heard and the way, like the areas that you have felt heard in. Wonderful. You've told me that you've shown me. Give me examples of evidence that she heard you. She shows up for counseling. She invests time and energy to help your clear thinking. What I'm asking is more in the moment when you have shared something. What does she do with her body, her eyes, her voice? What does she do in the moment to make you feel heard? Or does she? Is it more like you got to wait and see the action? I don't know. I'm just curious.
I could feel more heard in the moment.
You could feel more heard in the moment. Okay. And what might that look like?
Well, I mean, really, I think it all, it all depends on, again, it goes back to just our connection, right? And how connected we feel at a given time. And I think that's, and I think for a lot of people, I'm sure for a lot of people, especially with the quarantine, we're with each other all the time. And so,
can I asked you an open-ended question. Can I throw out some multiple choice for you?
Sure. That'd be great. Thank you. I'd like that.
So I'm guessing from what we've talked about that some of the most natural love languages for you in receiving love would be physical touch.
Good guess.
And words of affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like the way that you have learned to see and feel Amanda's love is probably in her acts of service. My guess is she probably does acts of service really naturally, and by the way, David's nodding a lot for podcast world out there, and that when you are in your clearest, most adult, you can probably tune yourself to the frequency of acts of service love coming in. But that's after the moment. In the moment is actually a wonderful opportunity to feel heard using your native love language of her grabbing your hand and repeating your words back to you from the way that she understands it. That might land more in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see, multiple questions. True or false? Would that land more in the moment? That physical touch and repeating your words.
Yes, I'm definitely very touch oriented, and I mean we're big snugglers.
So with that in mind, knowing that physical touch and words of affirmation are the way that you feel love most at your most vulnerable, anything else that you might ask her to do to help you feel more heard in the moment?
Participate. Be more confident in her own voice, and like we were highly communicative in our first year. We were just incredibly communicative about our wants, needs, and desires, and that in some ways that feels not in some ways that communication has waned as life sort of gets in the way.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to encourage you to think about this some more and give this acts of service person a list of how she can do an act of service. And again, I'm guessing this, but for her act of service, reaching out and holding your hand would be an act of service. Now, those of us that are physical touch people, it's like, no, you just touch. But for an active service person, we have to kind of switch it and say, grabbing my hand when I say something is an act of service to me, right? Mm-hmm. So help just kind of thinking about that. You might be able to task her with some ways to help you feel more heard. Now, Amanda, this is another place that we've talked about, where David has mentioned, and you agreed that in the beginning, you all were much more communicative about your wants, needs, and desires, and that you agree that you are less communicative of that. And we talked a little bit about what has made it not feel safe to communicate your desires. So David's saying, yes, participate and be confident in your own voice. Is there a way that David could make it feel safer for you to show up in confidence in your voice? Oh, that's so open-ended.
No. I can answer that one though. Okay. But it's fine. I mean, a lot of it is in his response, right? And just we all have to hear things that we don't necessarily like to hear, right? But we can definitely make it easier on others to tell us those things that we don't want to hear by remembering that hearing them is what gets us to the next stage. That's what gets us to the next level. So I think, yeah. And as you know, I'm a people pleaser, and I can't hurt people's feelings, right? I can't.
But I've asked you to hurt my feelings so many times over and over again, and you. What?
Again, though, you ask.
I don't know that you have necessarily taken it all that well.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
and
so
when we're talking about necessarily kind of in the beginning, right? Because in the beginning, you don't know what people's responses are going to be, so you don't start adapting your own behavior, I guess, in order to predict those.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there we go. That is a skill that you definitely learned, is to be adaptive, to be flexible. And it almost sounds when you say it, it's like I imagine it being a pretty unconscious auto response of you trying to fold yourself into the pretzel or be adaptive, not ask that question that's going to ruffle the feathers. Almost like where you maybe learn to be hyper vigilant for the emotional equilibrium of the people around you. And so without even thinking about it, you are trying to mold the situation and try to make it easier.
Yes.
Pleasing them.
Yes.
And David's like, well, just quit that shit and hurt my feelings. And you're like, like, it isn't that easy. It's such an auto response that we've got to stop, much like the auto response for you, David, of personalization, catastrophizing, and abandonment. It just happens that Amanda's without consciousness is going to be to try to be adaptive and make it safer and people please. It doesn't mean she can't go beyond that, but you both having some compassion and grace and generosity for each other's auto response and not get locked into what happened in the auto response. So for instance, if Amanda starts to like say, if you kind of see her doing the adaptive hustle, that you might be able to say, you don't have to hustle with me. Remember? I'm not going to be mad at you. I really want to hear your truth. Okay. Then she might be able to do some autocorrect. Or Amanda, if you kind of shut down and you see David start to amp up and like reach for more of this questioning and more of this soothing, you might be able to say, I'm not going to abandon you. I am here. And then he can go, okay, right. Auto response. Let's see if I can correct with more consciousness. Yeah. So here's what I wrote of what you said, Amanda. So I write these notes, but they're my response. They're my summary of what you said. So I said, is there anything that David can do to make it safer for you to be confident in your own voice? And my summary was his response. He can make it easier to share what he doesn't want to hear. I need for him to remember that me sharing is an attempt to get us there, to get us to that intimacy. Does that sound right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm also wondering about, I also heard you say that David doesn't always, when he said hurt my feelings and you've done it, it hasn't always gone well. And I heard that and I'm noting it and we don't have time to get into that tonight. So for the next time, but in more of just a little bit of a takeaway for you, have you ever done any asking or requesting about the pace or the amount of information or connection you do at one time? I don't know, David, I don't know. Again, you and I resonate a lot with you. Sometimes it's like if the door cracks open and I see a little intimacy or a little like capacity for deep emotional connection, I'm like, oh boy, here we go. Let me get my journal out. I've got all these things I've been waiting to talk to you about. And I can absolutely fire hose exhaust my partners.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sound like it fits here, Amanda? Like if that maybe you could do it if it wasn't quite so much at one time or without so much intensity at one time?
Well, definitely the second one. I think I think there's so much of myself that I have wanted to share and have been willing to share, but haven't gotten there yet because for whatever reason.
Is there anything about this that could be potentially made better by pace, a shift in pace and intensity?
Well, so yeah, I mean, yes, definitely. If the intensity was brought down, I could share a whole lot more.
And what would the intensity being brought down? What would that look like or feel like? How would David know?
Well, just like David said earlier, that he knows, and you said too, like, we know when we are being seen and heard. I know when David comes to the table to hear me or to validate something else that hasn't, whatever.
It's like his own need to validate validation.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, you could just tell in the questions, right? In the response questions. So I guess the intensity would be brought down if I felt like he was really asking questions to get a deeper understanding without any of his own shit involved, which is hard for anybody.
Yeah. I don't want to get into it, Catherine, but some of the questions I ask and the answers don't come for years, and that's challenging.
Yeah, sure. It's and so sure there can be some intensity built up in them because you feel like you haven't gotten them answered. The word I want to maybe end with is see if this resonates, Amanda. Maybe asking for more of a focus on curiosity instead of a drive for validation or a drive to an end, like maybe a little more lighthearted curiosity. Does that sound right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
True or false?
That's true.
And David, yes, that's hard when you've got this backlog. It naturally builds intensity. That's what a dam does, right? When you felt dammed up or you felt stymied in your attempts, there's this backlog of things you want to connect with and understand and ask, and that is not easy work to slow down, slow to her pace. And I don't mean that with judgment, like it's just a different pace. It's a different emotional stamina. Another way that is coming to me. And that
we've done. I mean, that's why we're working with you.
Sorry, what's that?
That's what we've done. That's why we're working with you.
You've done what?
Really not engaged on this part of our relationship.
Okay. But I guess what I'm saying is instead of it being not engaged or fully engaged, that there is a way to engage differently and trying to engage with a more lighthearted curiosity and noticing when you feel that intensity of the dam backing up and you doing that inner psychic work of being like, hey boys, meaning all of your inner parts, I need one question. You guys decide which ones, but I'm only bringing one to the table tonight. And like let them send the one that matters the most up and then say, this is the only one we're working on. And I want to be curious and I want to give space and I don't want to have 16 follow-up questions because that's going to shut her down. And to be able to invite her into this instead of like impacting her, like we must decide this today kind of thing, which can happen with that buildup. I understand. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to stop us here. We could definitely keep going. You guys are really in a rich, ripe place to do this work. I can see how much it matters to you right now. So if without stopping, we would keep going all night. So I'm going to stop and give you both a chance to take a deep breath and share a takeaway before we shift to feedback.
Well, I mean, I guess working on the golden to platinum rule, I can see how for me that works kind of on changing a mindset, but also working on putting the words to both my wants and needs and taking care of my partner.
Okay.
And I can see, I mean, I don't need to fill in the blanks. I'd like some of the blanks to be filled in by Amanda. And that'll happen, I guess, on her, when that works for her. And I'm learning to be okay with that.
Mm-hmm. I will go ahead and mention, because we've already talked a little bit about teen, or, the rebellious teen chair character. That sentence of wanting these to be filled by Amanda, yes, it will happen when it works for her. My rebellious teen would have a freaking heyday with that. Like, oh yeah, let's just wait some more till it's convenient for her. That would be like fodder for my rebellious teen. So maybe another way is taking, and some of that is true, that it would be like kind of waiting, but they're, instead of just releasing the power in that way, which your rebellious teen will not like, is more like, when I get in that space of wanting to impact and do, it's like, how can I shift this to be more inviting? How can I bring that lighthearted curiosity? Which of these questions would be the one that feels the most important, that I can stay lighthearted in and fill in? So you get to take some of that power back, and bringing some of that back into your locus of control. Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. Let's, you guys get to take big, deep breaths now, the real deep breaths. We'll go back to feedback from everybody. And then again, remember, you have one more bit on the hot seat where I ask you to share what it was like to be on the hot seat. And then I'll ask you to share what it felt like to get the feedback. So we'll come back to you at the end. All right. Who would like to start?
We're happy to go first. I mean me. I can't speak for the both of us. I'm happy to go first. Well, for one, thank you guys I just can't get over how brave you are, Amanda, just sharing this piece of you that, that communication is so hard for you, and that, questions and all this, and you're here on a podcast with other couples, and, wow, that's amazing. And way to really grow. Try to grow as a person doing things that are hard. So that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And David, I can just relate so much to you when you're really questioning and you maybe want a specific answer and you're not getting that. And then you just ask more and more questions. I can relate to that a lot. And when you said, then we just end up roommates, and I hear that from my partner, and it's like a punch in the gut. It's rough to hear that. And the people pleaser in me, Amanda, feels like, man, I am doing something so wrong. So I just really appreciated hearing from both of you, and just really could relate to that. So it's a you both talking is emotional for me. So thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Laura.
Casey here. As we heard Laura, a lot of what you two said really seemed to resonate, are just the difficulties, the communication style differences, the maybe the love language differences, is something I feel that her and I battle a lot. David, when you said, I feel like I'm an emotional person, and I have a lot of emotions, but I can deal with hurt feelings. And I feel like sometimes my partner doesn't realize that, she doesn't want to hurt my feelings. But it's okay. And trying to get that point across, or just having that same feeling of it's okay. I'm not fragile. The world won't collapse if that happens, and I can move past that. And then also being, afraid to ask questions, or really having the ability to communicate, I guess, in the right way where the questions are heard and not misinterpreted, and some of that. So I'm just rambling now because, you guys speaking really, really did hit some chords with me, and I appreciate both of you guys sharing and being vulnerable. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Casey, I just want to remind you that we are all emotional people. We just don't all share them. And I just say that because I for people that say, oh, I'm not an emotional person, that's not true. They're just shut down to it. And so from one emotional person to another, I always say it's like, well, shoot, that's one less bit of counseling I got to do, because I don't have to like unpack to be able to emote. I do it pretty naturally. So I definitely wanted to mention that. And boy, Laura, when you said that about the like asking more and more questions to try to get the soothing, that one really hit me. So feedback on your feedback. Great work, you guys. Who's next?
We'll go ahead.
All right.
We'll go out of order.
Well, I can't speak for myself, but Emma wants to go first.
I was going to say, actually, usually I go first. You should go if you're ready.
Yeah, no, I think, first of all, just the amount of courage it took to come on like a public forum and do what you two did is incredible. So thank you for that. And I think, as Catherine said, like, you're obviously both very committed to making this better. And it sounds like you do both connect in so many ways, right? We run a business together and you do so many things very well together, but there's like these couple of sticking points. And I think that's something that we can relate to, and hits home. Like we sync up, like, a huge percentage of the time, but then there's these gaps, and then those gaps like expose like these huge problems that are very difficult. And I think it was interesting. I thought like there was multiple times, and I know we're not here to like pick teams, but like as you were each speaking, I was like, oh, I'm like Amanda. And then a minute later, I'm like, no, I'm more like David. And then I'm like, no, I'm more like Amanda. And so like, it was weird how I kept trying to like fit us into your boxes. And I was like, why? It's you each combined some qualities of each of us. And that really kind of messed with my head, because I was like, well, I don't know how you can be part me and part Emma. So I haven't figured out how to unravel that. But yeah, a lot of it hit home, and thank you for being here and sharing, and we appreciate it.
And Finn, if you don't mind, let me jump in, or Emma, if you don't mind, let me jump in. Finn, one of the things I'll mention is that I often see this in couples where the more we do together and the more we do well together, the more often we're on the same page. That when we're not on the same page, you said it's a huge problem. And I want to point out in perspective, it probably isn't all that huge, but it can feel so huge because we're not used to being on different pages. It can feel like a really big attachment threat when it really isn't, but it can feel so big because we're not used to it. And we tend to be the couples in our circles that people look to and think, wow, they are so strong and so steady, and they've got this, because we are on the same page a lot of the time. So I always like to remember that when I feel like my husband and I are having a huge issue, I'm like, wait a minute, is it actually huge, or is it just because we're not used to struggling with things? So anyway, go ahead, Emma.
First off, newsflash, we're figuring all of this out just the same as you two, all of you, all the listeners, everyone. We have our own shit to deal with, and we're working on it. But I wanted to say thank you again to Amanda and David for being brave. And like Finn said, this is a big step, and we really appreciate you being willing to do that. And similar to what he said, I was trying to pick sides too, of like seeing which one I related to more. And I also relate to both of you in different ways. And at the very beginning, when Catherine called it communication restraints, which I think there's a term you two brought up, and that you've poisoned the safe framework, that really hit home. I could just relate to that a lot in realizing that there's things that have happened over time that you don't necessarily always realize that you're doing, and it can start to poison that safe place in a different different ways. And that really hit home. The idea of the BS files and belief systems also hit home. And the inviting you into the safe space, inviting you to share, that I can relate to that a lot too, because it's something that I am really working hard on being better at, rather than pushing and pushing and pushing, and instead of inviting. It's not always easy. So, just thank you so much for being here and for sharing and being brave, and it's amazing. So thank you.
Great feedback, you guys.
Can I throw one other thing out there, Catherine and David, Amanda? There was an analogy I thought of with the open-ended questions versus the closed, the yes/no questions. That it was interesting because, I don't know everything that, that David does for a living, but like if sales was any part of it, like you're trained often to ask open-ended questions and then listen to the customer to find out what their needs are and how you can then take what you have to help meet their needs. And like I also thought of the flip side of like when you go to the optometrist and you're looking through the little lenses and he's like, A or B, 1 or 2, A or B, 1, and you're just like constantly like narrowing it in, and like it's really hard to, like, you're just guessing at that point, and you're like, I don't know, does she like this one or this one? We'll try that, and then she seemed to like that one, and then maybe we'll keep that one and we'll add a new one, and then but it's hard. It gets hard to be. You start to internalize that and be like, well, right now I'm the one that she said it's this one, but if there's another one and it's this him or him, and then it's okay, well, it's him today, and so it's just a weird. I don't know. I didn't have anything really like relevant with it. It just was kind of like an analogy I thought of that I was like, it's sort of the two sides of the coin. You've got like the salesperson versus the optometrist, and the optometrist doesn't look at you and go, well, what strength glasses do you think you need? Right? Like, that's not how it works. So
that's such a great analogy. And actually it made me think of something too, that, Amanda, if you are feeling at all on the spot, or if it brings up an old trigger of being on the spot, to be questioned, even if it's coming from your loving partner who wants to know you, if that message gets twisted and it starts to feel like you're on the spot or about to be in trouble, or you're going to say the wrong thing, and so it feels triggering, the part of your brain that's going to be lit up is a part that is black and white, binary, fight or flight. It doesn't want an open-ended discussion about whether you should run around the maple tree or the pine tree. It just wants you to fight or flight so you can survive. And so that might be one of the reasons why open-ended questions, it's like, does not compute. Like, I need it to be binary. Is it 1 or 0?
Mm-hmm.
So that might be another interesting way, David, for you to have some depersonalized understanding, that if it seems like you asking these open-ended questions are pulling her back, it might just be because the part of her brain that could respond to that is not online. Not that it has anything to do with you.
It's interesting because Tumblr was a fair portion of our courtship, and we would look at Tumblr together. And
I'm still grieving Tumblr. To look at something, I can always look at something visually and go, oh, that looks fun. Or look at something visually and go, no, I'm not into that. And it was very easy to share those pictures and yeah, sad Tumblr's gone.
Well, I feel really confident that between the two of you and what you do for work and your creativity, you can find a way to harness this information about the binary close-ended questions versus those prefrontal cortex open-ended questions to be able to find some common ground in that. Okay, we're breaking protocol here. Let's go back to feedback. It looks like Bill and Felice are waving, and they're going to get real close to their computer so we can hear them.
I sure hope so. Got near the speaker. First thing I want to say is just the word that comes to mind is just courageous. I'm just courageous and grateful that you two are so willing to share this, big, meaty topic that, and work on it. the thing that it brought to me made me think about some of the big things that when we were early in our relationship, we couldn't talk about, that were just simply off limits and that we couldn't get to, that were just basically forbidden, and how important it was, but how difficult it was to do that work to try to open those things up. And that for you to do this out and open and out in front of all of us like this was really special. It was really a fantastic thing that you're doing. And, I just, wish I could reach through the video screen and hug you guys for being, so brave and so willing to do something like this. It's just really special. And, it made us think about all the work that we've done and more than that, how that work can pay off and how that work is something that can really benefit every portion of your life together. And, we wish you guys just the very best in getting through this.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, I ditto what Bill said. I think this is a really tough issue to say, so I appreciate you being vulnerable with us. I really related to David because I too am bipolar with good meds, raised by a bipolar mother. So I understand the need for high-level communication because you do fill in the blanks with your version of the story. I don't know if that's a bipolar thing or just everybody does that, but catastrophizing, I really, that word really hit me intensely because I do that. I mean, not Bill. Bill and I have great communication, but like at work sometimes or with the men that, in my life that I play with that are my FWBs. I have one in particular that gives me a lot of stress, and I catastrophize a lot. And then he says, "Why are you thinking that way?" And I go, "I don't know, because you're not talking to me. I need input. Tell me you like me. Tell me I have a good ass. Tell me anything." And he's like, I'm not that kind of guy, he says. And I'm like, it's almost 3 years, and I have to just accept him for who he is. And I get that. So I really related to that. And, I guess this might be a bit of advice. And I don't want to feel like that because I know Catherine wouldn't like that. But I think every good relationship needs a communicator, a pusher. Bill's a pusher. And so that really, I know that maybe David asked you questions, but I think that shows caring and support. And I think it's healthy. I don't want to give advice, but that's the way Bill demands it. And I, after 35 years of it, I don't even think twice about it anymore. Mm. So, and I love the part that you brought in love languages. That's very meaningful to me. I'm an acts of service person. And so Bill's really good at that.
Yeah, because I'm a people pleaser.
He's a people pleaser. And that was very useful to us when we talked about that last time. So anyway, just really good stuff. Thank you.
Thank you, Felice. That was lovely. All right, Jack and Jill.
David and Amanda, first off, I want to thank you for your vulnerability and honesty. As you know, Jack and we've done hot seats, and just to keep your train of thought and yet remain open and honest it's kind of like walking a fine line. It's not easy. So congratulations, you did fantastic at it. And what kept coming up for me was a safe container. And I know for Jack and I, to learn to use our voices, both of us, in a productive, safe way, like without passive aggressiveness or without double meanings to our words or to our questions or filling in the blanks like you talked about, has been one of our biggest challenges. So I feel you guys on that, and just know that you're not alone, and you're not anywhere where you're not supposed to be. Like you said, you're only together 6 years. Well, I mean, what did we just start figuring this out 2 years ago? There's no finish line and there's no starting line, really. So thank you.
Thanks, Jill.
Yeah. David and Amanda, this is Jill. This is Jack. I'd like to thank you for your courage. It's you brought up some heavy stuff, and I could see myself in both of you in the times where we're in conflict, and it just feels like my hand's right there, and I want that connection. But I get in my adolescent and start beating things and fucking shit up. So thank you for being that mirror for me, for us. And yeah, incredibly brave, incredibly, I see what this means to both of you, and that you're willing to put in the hard work to work through this. So you got the want to. You got this.
Thank you, Jack and Jill. All right. Thank you all for your feedback. So Amanda and David, will end with you. I'll ask you to both report on what it felt like now that you're 30 minutes post. How was the hot seat? And then how it felt to hear the feedback.
I think for me, I've always believed that anything that was worth doing is supposed to be hard. That's the way that the universe, designed it. So I've always been willing to accept that. But, knowing that, as Emma said, we both, and as you said, Catherine, that, we both poisoned that pot, and just kind of, owning that. But, so the hot seat, it felt good to kind of feel like we're getting closer. We're doing some of that hard work. And I would say, hearing the feedback felt great, because it has been hard work. This isn't easy for me. Actually, the first podcast that we ever did was Ben and Emma's, and I can just remember that every word barely came out. So thank you for having us back again, so that we can continue our hard work, because we are worth it.
Yes, we are. This has been a really incredible relationship, and this has been an incredible process. Hearing Bill and Felice, there were so many things that both of you said that resonated for me, and that I know resonated for Amanda. And then, in the next session with Jill and Jack, again, so many things that just, struck both of us. And Catherine, that's why we reached out to you, wanting to start working with you, because we could see that this was really impactful, and that we had stuff we want to work on, because we intend to be partners for a hell of a long time, and
ever and ever and ever.
Forever and ever. So the feedback was great, because it's starting to cool a little bit down on the hot seat, so that's nice.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for your bravery, and yes, for really bringing a juicy, tough, you guys are really in it, issue to the table to work on so publicly. It was really brave, and obviously very impactful, because of how much bravery. I think like the more brave you feel like you need to be to bring an issue, often the more impactful sharing that issue with other people is going to be. And you all certainly embodied that. So thank you. And we will look forward to Laura and Casey next week and as our last hot seat, and then we'll do some wrap up. Thank you all. Have a great night.
And we're back. Thank you again to David and Amanda for showing up and being vulnerable. As I always say, like, it's just amazing to have all of you be so authentic and open with all of us. So thank you, and thank you to all of us everyone on the hot seat. I'm sorry. Thank you to everyone who's on the bleachers and listening and witnessing, and thank you, of course, to Catherine as well.
And again, this is another one where I was really blown away by the feedback. We keep talking about the hot seat, but I really want to, again, highlight the benefit and encourage you to listen to the benefit that the couples that are in the bleachers, how they're learning to give better feedback, the impact it has to the people on the hot seat, and just to take a minute to imagine how much better the communication is getting between these partners as they're learning to give better feedback to others. And I think you really start to see that the more of these episodes go on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, thank you for mentioning that as well. And as we said in the intro, more information and links to everything in our show notes are on our website, normalizingnonmonogamy.com, or in your podcast player. And next week, next Friday, you will have the opportunity to listen to Laura and Casey on the hot seat. So if you have a chance before next Friday, listen to their episode 105 on our show for more information. Anything else you have to add?
Nope, you said it all. Nailed it.
Nailed it. Okay, bye everyone. Thanks for listening.